Well, we just had Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and it's, of course, a day to honor a man who preached racial tolerance. But in Texas, some students are being accused of exploiting racial stereotypes. The college party featured black stereotype costumes, fried chicken, malt liquor that was served in brown paper bags at this party. So should these kids be kicked out of college? The school says that they're now investigating the situation. Here to talk about this is Mark Lamont Hill. He's an assistant professor at Temple University. Mark, welcome. Always good to have you.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here.
What's your reaction when you look at these pictures and you hear about this party?
I was disgusted and dismayed. You know, a few months ago, maybe even a year or two ago at Texas A&M, there was a similar incident. And we all thought that it was an isolated incident, that it would never happen again. And then this happens. That suggests to me that there might be a broader pattern of sort of racist underground rituals that go on in universities around the nation. And I've seen it firsthand locally at Temple, but also talking to my colleagues around the country. We hear this a lot. I think what needs to happen is university needs to take this quite seriously and sternly discipline anyone who is involved.
But what do you think about the fact that the school's vice president is saying that they are trying to figure out if there were policy violations here?
Well, the policy violations are clear. The university has a responsibility to protect the interests not only of a narrow group of students, but everybody. You create a hostile and unsafe and uncomfortable environment for everybody when you sanction really modern-day minstrel shows. I mean, you have a group of people who dress up, who mock black people, who have stereotypes about black people, who have caricature black people in public space. You're actually creating a modern-day extension of a minstrel show, and that creates an enormously unsafe environment for black students, for brown students, and for white students who oppose such activities.
Who do you think's to blame for this kind of behavior?
I think the university is to blame to the extent that they don't monitor such things. But more importantly, I think the individual students need to know better. These are students who should know better. Unfortunately, they don't. So I don't blame the university too much for the students actually doing it. But if the university doesn't respond in a responsible fashion, then we need to blame them for any future incidents, to be sure.
Just real quick, Mark, do you think they should be kicked out of school? What's an appropriate punishment?
Absolutely.
All right.
No doubt about it.
Let's bring everybody back in to the panel. Danielle, what do you think about this when you look at these pictures? What does it tell you?
Well, it tells me that there are a lot of stupid kids in college.
Yeah.
I knew that when I went to school.
Yeah, that's true.
The question is, what is incumbent on society and
Right.
on the school's administrators to do about this? And I think that it would be a total overreaction to kick them out of school. Where do we want to draw the line at regulating how people behave? Was somebody hurt or were feelings hurt? Were they stupid or were they actually dangerous? Can they have parties that ridicule fat girls? What about ugly girls? What about ugly men? I mean, where do we want to draw the line at where the school regulates how kids behave when people aren't actually physically hurt?
So, Josh, if I'm a parent of a black child at that school, is there legal action that I can take?
Well, I think that the question here is whether it should be criminalized. You know, and I think that exactly as Jane said, that Danny said, that you get to a point where you go, it's really responsibility of people. It's freedom of expression is what we're talking about, and going where does that line should be, stifled and where it shouldn't be. And I think that of all places, we'll all agree that college campuses is where you grow into yourself. You're 17, 18, 19, 20. That's where freedom of expression should not be curtailed. What needs to be brought in here is that, I don't think it criminalized administratively. I think what happens is it really comes down to people making statements and saying, listen, you better feel what these people, as a black person, as a gay person, as whatever person lives, feel what they feel, and you'll learn a little bit about what their culture's about, and you wouldn't do behavior like this. I don't think we should stifle any kind of expression.
I can't help but think that the parents have to be to blame in some way in this story, because when I look at it, there are kids who chose to go to this party, and there are kids who chose not to go to this party. And I think that you grow up with a certain set of beliefs, and you learn what's being spoken about, subtly or in a very clear way around you. I'm not sure the school is to blame. I wonder about the way these kids were raised, though, Edwina. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think there's no excuse for what they did is disrespectful, and I hate to see the American holidays become commercialized, and then also even worse, people be disrespectful. I claim Martin Luther King. I'm from Montgomery, Alabama. I grew up next to the church, Dexter Avenue Church. And there's no excuse, but it's not against the law, and we have to remember that people have the right of free expression, First Amendment right, and free speech.
Right.
So they shouldn't.
But this definitely crosses the line of
Mark, I'm going to come to you in 1 sec.
Of free speech, and this is happening on other college campuses. Mark referred to it. There's events called Catch an Illegal Immigrant. There's affirmative action bake sales, and this is happening more and more with what seems to be conservative students. All these activities were organized by a group called the Young America Foundation, and it concerns me because that doesn't reflect this generation. This generation is the most diverse generation in history, and they're more progressive, and so it concerns me that kind of fringe students are now acting out against racism.
Mark's nodding his head, and I want to bring him in because go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing is, if this were just a group of kids in a house having fun and kids will be kids and they learn and they grow, that's great. But the problem is this contributes to a hostile environment for other students on campus. As an African American, if I were on a campus where I knew that white students were dressing up, making fun of black people, dressing up as Aunt Jemima, carrying mock guns and malt liquor, I would feel unsafe on that campus. That's a critical issue here. We can't divorce this from the historical context of racism in America. Minstrel shows where white people would dress up in blackface and mock black people was connected to a broader matrix of oppression, which is critical to black people. Black people don't forget that stuff, and neither do brown people, and neither do white people who care seriously about these issues.
And you know, Mark, the other thing that struck me in this is that these kids put these photos out on, you know, one of their websites of passing around pictures. So they obviously thought the whole thing was really funny, and they wanted to share it with their friends.
Yeah, they were very
and that there would be no penalty.
And it's horrible.
And that there would be no penalty.
And that's why the school has to step up and say, you know what, we got to make a responsible statement and really make a statement. I don't think once
the kids have apologized. They've stood up. They've apologized. They, you know, people say that what they've been through over the past few days is enough punishment for them. Just really quick around the table, should they be kicked out of school or not, Danielle?
Absolutely not.
Jane?
No, but there should be some policies put in place.
Josh?
Absolutely not.
Edwina?
Not kicked out. They apologized. Lesson learned. We need to accept the apology.
All right, and Mark thinks they should be kicked out. He's already on the record as having said that. We'll see what happens to them. Mark Lamont Hill, always good to have you with us, and Josh
Always pleasure to
Hanchak,
be here.
Edwina Rogers, Jane Fleming, and Danielle Petka. Good to have you. Great to have you here at the table. Thanks. All right, coming up.